The morning sun cast long shadows across the farming settlement of New Eden as Sarah Chen stepped out of her small home. She breathed in the fresh air of the colony world, watching the purple-tinged grass sway in the gentle breeze. This planet, far from the crowded core worlds of human space, had become their sanctuary. Sarah walked toward the community greenhouse, her daily routine unchanged for the past 5 years. She and her husband Marcus had chosen this quiet life deliberately. After everything they had been through, peace felt like the greatest luxury in the galaxy. The other colonists waved at her as she passed. Children ran between the houses, laughing as they chased small, harmless native creatures that looked like floating jellyfish. Everyone knew Sarah as the gentle woman who grew the best vegetables on the planet and always had time to help a neighbor. What they didn't know was that her husband Marcus was the most feared man in the galaxy. Marcus Chen sat in his workshop behind their house, carefully repairing a farming tool. His hands, steady and precise, moved with the skill of someone who had once used those same hands for very different purposes. The scars on his knuckles were faded now. Barely visible unless you knew where to look, he had been known by many names across the stars. The Ghost, the Reaper, the man who could kill anyone, anywhere, anytime. But the name that made even the most hardened criminals whisper in fear was simple: Baba Yaga. For 15 years, Marcus had been the galaxy's most efficient killer. Not a mindless murderer, but a precise instrument of justice and revenge. When powerful people crossed certain lines, when the law couldn't touch the untouchable, they called him. He never failed a contract, never left a witness, never showed mercy to those who deserved none. But then he met Sarah. She had been a medic on a space station where he was recovering from a particularly difficult job. Sarah didn't know who he was, didn't care about his reputation. She saw only a man in pain and helped heal him. More than his physical wounds, she had somehow reached the part of his soul he thought was dead forever. For the first time in his life, Marcus wanted something more than violence. He wanted peace. He wanted love. He wanted a future where his hands created instead of destroyed. So he disappeared. The galaxy's most feared assassin simply vanished one day, leaving behind a legend and countless enemies who assumed he was finally dead. Marcus and Sarah found this remote colony world and built a new life. He became a farmer, a mechanic, a helpful neighbor. Sarah continued her medical work, healing instead of just patching people up to fight another day. For 5 beautiful years, Marcus had been nobody special, just a quiet man who loved his wife and enjoyed watching things grow instead of die. The Imperial cruiser times Domination times entered the system without warning. Captain Vex Kronos stood on the bridge, his scaled reptilian features showing satisfaction as he watched the small human colony appear on their screens. "Sir, this is barely a settlement," his second officer said. "Our records show fewer than 300 humans. No military installations, no strategic value." Captain Kronos smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Exactly, Lieutenant. These humans think they can simply scatter across the galaxy, claiming worlds that belong to the Empire. Today, we remind them of their place. The Thakari Empire had been expanding for 200 years, consuming world after world. They were efficient conquerors. But more than that, they enjoyed making examples. Fear was their greatest weapon, and they maintained it by occasionally destroying settlements that technically violated their territorial claims. The humans on New Eden had filed all the proper paperwork. They had permission from 3 different galactic councils to establish their colony. But none of that mattered to an empire that rewarded its captains for aggressive expansion. "Begin bombardment of the settlement's infrastructure," Kronos ordered. "Leave the residential areas intact for now. We want survivors to spread word of what happens when humans claim Imperial space." The first energy beam struck the community center and the main communication array. Explosions rocked the peaceful settlement as people screamed and ran for cover. Sarah was in the greenhouse when the attack began, helping Mrs. Patterson with her sick tomato plants. The building shook violently as another blast destroyed the water treatment facility. Sarah grabbed Mrs. Patterson, helping the elderly woman toward the exit as glass rained down around them. "Sarah, Mrs. Patterson cried out as debris fell between them. A massive support beam crashed down, separating them just meters from safety. Sarah looked back at the terrified woman trapped behind the fallen beam. The roof was collapsing, fires spreading rapidly through the wooden structure. She had seconds to escape, but she couldn't leave Mrs. Patterson to die. Marcus was fixing a broken irrigation system when the ground shook beneath his feet. He looked up to see Imperial ships in the sky and explosions blooming across his peaceful community. Every muscle in his body tensed as old instincts awakened. He dropped his tools and ran toward the settlement center, toward Sarah. As he ran, his mind automatically cataloged threats, escape routes, weapon possibilities. The dormant predator in him stirred to life after 5 years of silence. The greenhouse was an inferno when he arrived. Colonists were pulling people from the wreckage, but the main structure was collapsing too quickly. Marcus pushed through the crowd, searching desperately for his wife. "Marcus!" Someone called out. It was Dr. Williams, their neighbor. "Sarah's still in there." "She went back for Mrs. Patterson." Marcus stared at the burning building. The logical part of his mind calculated the odds of survival, the structural integrity of the remaining supports, the speed of the spreading fire. The numbers were not good, but the other part of his mind, the part that loved Sarah more than his own life, didn't care about numbers. He was moving toward the flames when the roof collapsed completely. The entire structure came down in a thunderous crash, sending up a pillar of sparks and smoke that could be seen across the settlement. Marcus stopped running. He stood perfectly still, watching the flames consume everything. Someone was talking to him, hands on his shoulders, but he couldn't hear the words. The only sound in his universe was the crackling of fire and the silence where Sarah's voice should be. In the burning greenhouse, there had been no time for a heroic rescue. No dramatic last-second escape. Just a roof falling and 2 good women dying because they tried to help each other. The Imperial bombardment continued for another hour, methodically destroying infrastructure while leaving most of the colonists alive. It was a calculated demonstration of power, designed to create refugees who would spread fear across human space. Captain Kronos was satisfied with the operation. They had made their point without wasting ammunition on complete destruction. The surviving humans would abandon this world and tell others what happened to those who defied the Empire. As the Imperial ships prepared to leave, their sensors detected no military response from the colony. No hidden defenses, no distress signals to human military forces. Just a collection of broken farmers and families, exactly as expected. What their sensors didn't detect was one man standing in the ashes of a greenhouse, holding the charred remains of a wedding ring he had pulled from the rubble. They couldn't measure the change happening inside him, as 5 years of peace burned away like dried grass. Marcus stood there long after the Imperial ships jumped to hyperspace. Colonists brought him water, offered him places to stay, tried to comfort him with words about Sarah's bravery and sacrifice. He accepted their kindness with distant politeness, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. That night, Marcus returned to his workshop. In the back, behind carefully concealed panels, was a collection of items he had hoped never to touch again. Weapons, equipment, information, the tools of his former trade, maintained out of old habit but never used. His fingers traced over familiar shapes in the darkness. A molecular blade that could cut through any armor. Neural disruptors that could stop a heart from across a room. Infiltration gear designed to get him into places that didn't exist on any map. At the bottom of the collection, wrapped in cloth that had never yellowed, was a small device no larger than a coin. It was a quantum communicator, tuned to frequencies used only in the darkest corners of the galaxy. A direct line to people who traded in secrets, violence, and the kind of justice that courts couldn't provide. Marcus activated the device for the first time in 5 years. The response was immediate. Well, came a familiar voice from across space. "The ghost returns." "I was starting to think you were really dead, Marcus." "I was," Marcus replied, his voice quiet and steady. "But something just brought me back to life. I heard about New Eden. I'm sorry about Sarah. She was good people." Marcus said nothing. The silence stretched across light years. "What do you need?" the voice asked finally. Everything you have on Captain Vex Kronos and the crew of the Imperial Cruiser Times, Domination Asterisk. Their roots, their habits, their families. Everything. That's going to cost you. The Thakari Empire has deep pockets and long memories. I don't care about the cost, Marcus said. And they're about to learn that some memories are longer than others. There was a pause on the other end of the communication. When the voice returned, it carried a note of something that might have been sympathy, or perhaps anticipation. I'll have the information to you within 6 hours, Marcus. Marcus looked at Sarah's ring, still clutched in his other hand. I know exactly what I'm doing. Then welcome back, Baba Yaga. The galaxy is about to remember why monsters tell stories about you. The communication ended. Marcus sat in the darkness of his workshop, surrounded by the tools of his former life. Tomorrow, he would say goodbye to Marcus the farmer, Marcus the neighbor, Marcus the man who had tried to build something beautiful in a violent galaxy. Tomorrow, the Baba Yaga would return. And an empire was about to learn that some people should never be awakened. The information arrived exactly 6 hours later, transmitted through channels so secure that most governments didn't know they existed. Marcus read through the files in his workshop while the rest of New Eden slept, their dreams troubled by memories of fire and imperial weapons. Captain Vex Kronos was a career officer who had been promoted through the ranks by showing initiative in frontier pacification. Over 12 years, he had destroyed 47 settlements, killed thousands of civilians, and collected bounties on the resources of conquered worlds. The Empire rewarded such efficiency. The Times Domination Times followed predictable patrol routes through outer systems, hunting for easy targets. Kronos preferred attacking agricultural colonies and research stations, places with no military defenses and plenty of witnesses to spread fear. He was scheduled to hit 3 more human settlements in the next month. Marcus memorized every detail: crew rotations, supply schedules, personal habits of the officers. Kronos had a wife and 2 children on the imperial capital world. He collected art stolen from conquered civilizations. He had a fear of confined spaces and a gambling addiction that had cost him a fortune at the private casinos frequented by imperial elites. But most importantly, Marcus learned where the Times Domination Times would be tomorrow night. The ship would dock at Kepler Station for fuel and supplies. It was a neutral trading post that served ships from dozens of different species, a place where imperial officers could drink, gamble, and enjoy entertainment away from the strict discipline of their vessel. Marcus packed carefully. His old suit was still perfectly tailored, the fabric designed to deflect energy weapons while looking like expensive civilian clothing. The molecular blade went into a hidden sheath along his spine. Neural disruptors fit into cufflinks that appeared decorative but could kill from across a room. Most importantly, he packed Sarah's ring on a chain around his neck. Not for sentiment, but as a reminder. Every time he felt the weight of it, he would remember why he was doing this. Before he left New Eden, Marcus visited the small cemetery where they had buried Sarah and Mrs. Patterson. The graves were covered with flowers from every family in the settlement. Sarah would have loved seeing how the community came together to honor them. I know you wouldn't approve, he said quietly to the fresh earth. You always believed there was another way, a better way. Maybe you were right. But they killed you. And the law won't touch them for it, so I'll touch them instead. The wind rustled through the purple grass, carrying the scent of growing things. Marcus had built a life here, based on Sarah's belief that people could change, that violence didn't have to be the answer to everything. Now he was about to prove that some people were wrong about that. Kepler Station orbited a gas giant on the edge of imperial space, its lights visible from thousands of kilometers away. It was technically neutral territory, but that neutrality was maintained through carefully negotiated treaties and the understanding that certain rules applied to everyone. Marcus arrived on a commercial transport, just another human businessman traveling the space lanes. He rented a suite in the station's luxury section and spent the day observing the imperial officers who came aboard to enjoy the station's entertainment. They were loud, arrogant, and completely relaxed. In their minds, they were heroes of the Empire, civilizing the galaxy one burned settlement at a time. They talked openly about their recent mission to New Eden, joking about how the human farmers had scattered like insects when the bombardment began. Did you see the one who went back into the burning building? Lieutenant Yak laughed over his drink. Humans are so stupidly sentimental. Probably died for nothing. Marcus listened from across the bar, his face showing nothing but polite interest. Inside, something cold and patient stirred to life. The Baba Yaga had always been methodical. Hasty kills were for amateurs. Captain Kronos arrived later that evening, accompanied by his senior officers. They took over the station's most expensive casino, where the captain indulged his gambling addiction, while his crew enjoyed the company of entertainment professionals from a dozen different worlds. Marcus waited until the captain was deep into his cups and losing badly at a high-stakes card game. Then he made his approach. "Captain Kronos," he said, offering a respectful bow. "I wonder if I might buy you a drink." Kronos looked up from his cards, his reptilian eyes focusing on the well-dressed human. "And you are?" "Marcus Chen, independent trader. I deal in agricultural equipment, among other things." The name was real, but it meant nothing to the Imperial officer. "I heard about your recent success in the outer colonies. Very impressive work." The flattery worked perfectly. Kronos straightened in his chair, accepting the offered drink. "The Empire rewards those who maintain order in the frontier. Someone has to teach these human settlers respect for proper authority." "Absolutely," Marcus agreed, settling into the chair beside him. "I actually had business interests on one of those worlds. New Eden, I believe it was called?" "Ah, yes, that little farming settlement. We made quite an impression there." Kronos smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "Nothing teaches respect like a proper demonstration of force." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "I'm sure the message was received clearly. Were there many casualties?" "A few. Some woman died trying to save another from a collapsing building. Touching. Really. If you appreciate pointless gestures." Marcus's hand tightened imperceptibly on his drink glass. The neural disruptor in his cufflink could kill the captain instantly. But that would be too easy. Too quick. "Well, I'm sure they deserved whatever fate found them," Marcus said instead. "Shall we continue the game? I find I'm feeling rather lucky tonight." They played cards until the early morning hours. Marcus was an excellent player, but he let the captain win just enough to keep him engaged. More importantly, he learned everything he needed to know about the man's habits, his psychology, and his weaknesses. When Kronos finally staggered back to his ship, he was richer by several thousand credits, and completely convinced that Marcus Chen was nothing more than a smooth-talking human trader who appreciated the Empire's firm hand in galactic affairs. 2 days later, the Times Domination Times received an encrypted message on an emergency channel. It appeared to come from Imperial intelligence, requesting an immediate meeting with Captain Kronos at coordinates in a nearby asteroid field. The message contained proper authentication codes and mentioned intelligence about a possible human military buildup in the region. Kronos took a shuttle to the designated coordinates, accompanied by 2 guards. Imperial officers didn't normally respond to such requests personally, but the message had specifically requested his expertise in dealing with human settlements. His ego, combined with visions of another promotion, made the decision easy. The asteroid field was perfect for the meeting, isolated, with plenty of cover, and far from any shipping lanes. Kronos' shuttle landed on a small asteroid that had been hollowed out and converted into a discreet facility. Exactly the sort of place Imperial intelligence might use for sensitive operations. The guards went first, checking for threats with professional efficiency. They found nothing dangerous, just empty corridors and darkened rooms that suggested the facility had been abandoned for some time. "Sir," one of them called back, "there's nobody here. Should we return to the ship?" "Nonsense," Kronos replied, stepping into the facility. "Intelligence operatives are naturally cautious. They're probably watching us right now, confirming our identities." He was right about being watched, though not by Imperial intelligence. Marcus had been observing them since their shuttle landed. The facility was one of his old safe houses, abandoned years ago but still functional. He knew every corridor, every hiding spot, every system. Moving through it was like putting on comfortable old clothes. The captain's guards were competent but predictable. They followed standard Imperial protocols, which Marcus had memorized long ago. When the first guard rounded a corner, Marcus was waiting in the shadows above him. The molecular blade slid between armor plates with surgical precision, cutting through the man's spine before he could make a sound. The second guard noticed his partner's absence after 30 seconds and came looking for him. He found Marcus instead, standing in plain sight in the corridor ahead. "You," the guard said, recognizing the human from Kepler Station. "What are you doing here?" "Waiting," Marcus replied. The guard reached for his weapon, but Marcus was already moving. Years of peaceful farming hadn't slowed his reflexes or dulled his skills. The neural disruptor sent precisely calibrated energy into the guard's nervous system, stopping his heart instantly. Captain Kronos found the first body and immediately understood that he had been lured into a trap. He drew his sidearm and activated his personal communicator, calling for immediate extraction from his ship. Domination *, this is Captain Kronos. I need emergency pickup at my location. Hostile contact confirmed. Static answered him. The facility's old jamming systems were still functional, blocking all communications with the outside. "Clever," he said aloud, his voice echoing in the empty corridor. "But you've made a mistake, human. Imperial officers don't die easily." "No," came Marcus's voice from the shadows ahead. "They usually die screaming." Kronos fired at the sound, his energy weapon lighting up the corridor. The blast struck empty air. Marcus was already moving, using the facility's layout to approach from an unexpected angle. "Who are you?" Kronos demanded, backing toward what he hoped was an exit. "What do you want?" Marcus stepped into view at the end of the corridor, no longer bothering to hide. "You killed my wife." Kronos stared at him, his reptilian features showing confusion. "Your wife? I don't know what you're talking about. I've killed many people." "Her name was Sarah Chen. She died in a greenhouse on New Eden when your ship burned down her community." Understanding dawned in the captain's eyes. "The woman who went back into the building. You're her husband." He laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the metal walls. "She died for nothing, you know. That old woman she tried to save was dead before the roof even fell." Marcus said nothing. He simply began walking forward. Kronos fired again, but Marcus moved like a ghost, anticipating the shots and using the corridor's angles to avoid them. Years of retirement had been good for his patience, not his skills. "Wait," Kronos said as Marcus drew closer. "You're making a mistake. I'm an Imperial captain. Kill me, and the Empire will hunt you across the galaxy. But we can make a deal. I can give you information, resources. The Empire has many enemies. Someone with your skills could name his price." Marcus was close enough now to see the fear in the alien's eyes. "I already know my price." The molecular blade emerged from its hidden sheath, its edge glowing with contained energy. Kronos raised his weapon, but Marcus batted it aside with contemptuous ease. The captain was a competent soldier, but he had spent years fighting farmers and researchers, not professional killers. "Please," Kronos whispered, pressing himself against the wall. Marcus paused, the blade inches from the captain's throat. So did I. The strike was quick and clean. Kronos died without the screaming Marcus had promised, which was more mercy than the captain had shown to Sarah. When the Domination Times finally located their captain's shuttle 12 hours later, they found 3 bodies and a message burned into the facility's main wall in letters 3 feet high. "You killed Sarah Chen. This is just the beginning. Baba Yaga." News of Captain Kronos' death spread through Imperial channels within days. 3 soldiers dead, their bodies arranged with obvious professional skill. The facility had been sanitized of useful evidence. But the message was clear enough. Someone was hunting Imperial officers. Admiral Thax, commanding the Imperial fleet in this sector, read the reports with growing concern. The name Baba Yaga meant nothing to most Imperial officers, but Admiral Thax was older and better informed than most. He remembered stories from 15 years ago, whispered accounts of an unstoppable human killer who had murdered his way through crime syndicates, corrupt corporations, and government officials who thought themselves untouchable. The Baba Yaga had been a ghost story, a legend used to frighten those who operated in the galaxy's shadows. If the reports were accurate, that ghost had returned. and it was hunting the Empire. Double security on all ships, he ordered his aide. Cancel all shore leave until further notice. And send a priority message to Imperial intelligence. Tell them we have a problem that requires their immediate attention. But Marcus was already 3 systems away, following the Domination's planned route to their next target. The Imperial cruiser was headed for a human research station that studied alien agriculture techniques, exactly the sort of peaceful, defenseless facility that Captain Kronos had preferred to attack. Now Lieutenant Yak was in command, and he intended to complete the mission exactly as planned. The death of his captain had shaken the crew, but Imperial discipline held strong. They would show no fear in the face of a single human killer. They had no idea that they weren't just being hunted. They were being herded, guided toward a destination that Marcus had chosen very carefully. The research station was called Haven Point, and it was home to 200 scientists and their families. Marcus had arrived 3 days ahead of the Imperial ship. Posing as a traveling equipment salesman, he spent his time learning the station's layout and evacuation procedures while carefully placing shaped charges in strategic locations. When the Domination arrived on schedule, they found exactly what they expected: a peaceful research facility with no military defenses and no way to resist Imperial authority. What they didn't expect was for the station to explode the moment they locked onto it with their targeting systems. The explosion that destroyed Haven Point Research Station was visible from 3 neighboring star systems. Marcus had used precisely calculated charges to detonate the station's power core, creating a blast that looked like a catastrophic accident while completely obliterating the facility. Lieutenant Yak stared at the expanding debris field where their target had been just moments before. What happened? Did we hit something critical? His sensor officer checked the readings twice before answering. Sir, we hadn't fired a shot yet. The station exploded on its own. That's impossible. Civilian facilities don't just explode. But as they moved closer to investigate, their sensors detected something that made Yak's blood run cold. No life signs. The station had been completely evacuated before the explosion. Every scientist, every family member, every living being had somehow vanished without a trace. Sir, the communications officer called out. We're receiving a transmission. The main screen flickered to life, showing a figure in a dark suit standing against the backdrop of a starfield. The human appeared completely calm, his hands clasped behind his back like a lecturer addressing students. Hello, Lieutenant Yak, Marcus said. By now you've realized that Haven Point was empty when it exploded. I evacuated everyone 3 days ago. They're safe on a passenger liner, heading for core human space. Yak found his voice. You're the one who killed Captain Kronos. I am. And now I'm going to kill all of you. Marcus's tone remained conversational, almost friendly. Not because you're evil, though you are. Not because you threaten the galaxy, though you do. I'm going to kill you because you murdered my wife. The Imperial officers exchanged glances. They had been trained to handle many types of threats, but a single human making casual threats against a fully armed cruiser wasn't in any manual. You're insane, Yak said. This ship carries 300 crew and enough firepower to level a planet. You're one man. Marcus smiled for the first time since Sarah's death. It was not a pleasant expression. Yes, I am. But I'm the right man. The transmission ended. For a moment, the bridge of the Domination was silent, except for the humming of systems. Long-range sensors, Yak ordered. Find me that human's ship. All weapons, stand ready. But their sensors detected nothing except the expanding debris field and empty space. Wherever Marcus had transmitted from, he was no longer there. Sir, the sensor officer said carefully, there's something strange about this debris field. The composition isn't right for a research station. Before Yak could ask what that meant, proximity alarms began screaming throughout the ship. Something was approaching at incredible speed. Too fast for their defensive systems to track. Marcus's ship wasn't in the debris field, because it was the debris field. He had built it from salvaged Imperial technology over the past week, disguising it as wreckage, while positioning it exactly where the Domination would arrive. The ship was little more than engines, life support, and the most sophisticated stealth systems money could buy. Now it shed its camouflage and struck like a serpent. The Times Domination Times was massive and heavily armed, but it was designed to fight other capital ships, not a single fighter moving at impossible speeds. Marcus's ship was too small and too fast for their main guns, slipping through their defensive fire like a needle through cloth. His first strike took out their communications array with a precisely placed missile. The second destroyed their sensor dome, leaving them blind to everything except visual range. The third hit their engine controls, trapping them in space. "Damage report," Yak shouted over the alarms. "Engines offline, communications down, sensors destroyed," came the replies from multiple stations. How is one ship doing this? But even as he asked the question, Yak began to understand. This wasn't just any pilot attacking them. This was someone who knew Imperial ship design better than most Imperial engineers. Every strike hit exactly the right spot to cause maximum damage with minimal force. "Sir," the weapons officer called out, "he's coming around for another pass. I can't get a lock on him." Marcus's ship dove under the Times Domination's Times belly, using the cruiser's own bulk to shield himself from their defensive fire. More missiles struck home, taking out weapon turrets and shield generators with surgical precision. "All fighters, launch," Yak commanded. "Surround him." The Times Domination Times carried 12 fighters, fast interceptors designed to screen the cruiser from exactly this type of attack. They deployed in perfect formation, filling the space around Marcus's ship with weapons fire. For 30 seconds, it looked like they had him cornered. Then Marcus began to fly like no human had ever flown before. He spun between energy blasts that should have vaporized him, rolled under missiles that missed by millimeters, and turned inside the fighter's own turning radius to put shots into their engines. One by one, the Imperial pilots found themselves facing an opponent who seemed to anticipate their every move before they made it. "Impossible," whispered the Times Domination's Times flight controller. "No human can fly like that. Our reflexes are twice as fast as theirs." But Marcus wasn't relying on reflexes alone. During his years as the galaxy's most feared assassin, he had modified his nervous system with illegal enhancement technology. His reaction time was measured in microseconds. His spatial awareness extended in all directions like a sixth sense. More importantly, he knew these pilots. He had studied Imperial fighter tactics, memorized their training protocols, analyzed their psychological profiles. They were good pilots, but they thought like Imperial officers, aggressive, direct, predictable. Marcus thought like a predator. Within 10 minutes, all 12 fighters were debris floating in space. Marcus's ship emerged from the battle damaged but functional, its pilot apparently untouched by the withering fire that had filled the area. "Surrender," came his voice over emergency frequencies. "Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded." Lieutenant Yak looked around his bridge at officers who were beginning to show real fear. They had gone from predators to prey in less than an hour, and everyone aboard knew it. "Sir," his second officer said quietly, "we should consider his terms. Maybe we can negotiate." "Never," Yak snarled. "We are Imperial officers. We do not surrender to human terrorists." "Then you die like Imperial officers," Marcus replied over the open channel. "I can do this the easy way, or the hard way. The easy way is faster." Then, Yak cut the communication and turned to his crew. "Emergency power to shields. All remaining weapons, target that ship the moment he gets close enough." What happened next entered Imperial legend as the Domination Massacre. Marcus docked his ship with the cruiser's main airlock, cutting through the reinforced doors like they were paper. The ship's internal defenses should have killed any boarding party instantly. But Marcus moved through them like a ghost. He had spent years learning to infiltrate secure facilities, and an Imperial cruiser was just another target. The ventilation systems, maintenance tunnels, and service corridors that the crew barely knew existed were highways for someone with his training. The first squad of Marines sent to stop him never saw him coming. They found their comrades' bodies arranged in the corridor with Imperial discipline, neat rows, weapons stacked beside them, no signs of struggle. It was a message as clear as words. This is what happens when you serve an empire that murders innocents. Lieutenant Yak tried to coordinate the defense from his bridge, but Marcus was everywhere and nowhere. Security cameras showed empty corridors, then bodies. Motion sensors detected movement that vanished before anyone could respond. Internal communications began failing as key systems were sabotaged with professional precision. "Where is he?" Yak demanded. "How can one man be in 6 places at once?" The answer came when Marcus stepped onto the bridge through a maintenance hatch that no one had thought to guard. He moved like liquid death, the molecular blade in his hand humming with contained energy. The bridge crew reached for weapons, but Marcus was already among them. The blade sang through the air, cutting through armor and bone with equal ease. In 15 seconds, the command center of an Imperial cruiser became a tomb. Lieutenant Yak was the last one alive, backed against the captain's chair with his sidearm pointed at Marcus. His hand shook as he tried to aim at a target that wouldn't stay still. "You're a monster," he whispered. Marcus paused, Sarah's ring heavy against his chest. "Yes," he agreed. "But I'm your monster now. You made me when you killed my wife. It was just a mission, just another human settlement. We didn't know. You didn't know she was important to someone who could hurt you back," Marcus finished. "That's the problem with bullies. You never think about consequences until it's too late." Yak fired, but Marcus was no longer where the gun was pointing. The molecular blade took him between the ribs, sliding between armor plates to pierce his heart. He fell forward, his weapon clattering on the deck. Marcus stood alone on the bridge of an Imperial cruiser, surrounded by the bodies of its crew. Through the main view screen, he could see the stars that Sarah had loved to watch from their little house on New Eden. She would have hated what he had become again. She would have found another way. A better way. But Sarah was dead, and the galaxy was still full of predators who needed to be reminded that some prey could bite back. Marcus activated the ship's emergency beacon and recorded a message that would be received by every Imperial vessel in the sector. "This is Marcus Chen, known to some as the Baba Yaga. Your Captain Kronos murdered my wife during an unprovoked attack on New Eden Colony. I have killed him and his crew in return. This message is for Admiral Thax, who commands this sector." Marcus looked directly into the camera, his eyes holding all the cold patience of a professional killer. "Admiral, your forces have been attacking human settlements for sport. You see us as easy targets because we prefer farming to fighting. You think we're weak because we choose peace when we could choose war. Today, you learn the difference." He gestured to the dead officers around him. "These people died because they served an empire that murders civilians. You can end this now by withdrawing from human space and never returning. Or you can send more ships, and I will sink them one by one until you run out of crews willing to serve under your command." Marcus paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "I know you've heard stories about the Baba Yaga. Let me tell you which ones are true. I have killed crime lords in their fortress bunkers. I have assassinated corporate executives, surrounded by armies of bodyguards. I have made governments fall by removing the right people at the right times." He leaned closer to the camera. "But those were just jobs, Admiral. This is personal. Your people killed the only thing in the galaxy that I loved more than violence. So now violence is all I have left, and I am very, very good at it." The message ended. Marcus set the Times Domination's timed self-destruct sequence for a 12-hour delay, enough time for Imperial rescue ships to find the vessel and recover his message, but not enough time to save anything aboard. As he departed in his own ship, Marcus thought about the future. Admiral Thax would probably send more ships. The Empire didn't negotiate with terrorists, and they certainly wouldn't be intimidated by one human killer, no matter how skilled. Good. Marcus had nowhere else to be. 6 months later, the Thakari Empire quietly withdrew all forces from the Outer Rim territories, citing strategic redeployment in their official announcements. What they didn't announce was that Admiral Thax was dead, along with the crews of 7 Imperial vessels and 3 full regiments of Marines. The attacks on human settlements stopped completely. In the quiet corners of the galaxy, where information was bought and sold like any other commodity, a new legend was born. They said the Baba Yaga had returned, deadlier than ever, and with nothing left to lose. They said he moved through space like a ghost, striking without warning and vanishing without trace. They said he had made the mighty Thakari Empire back down through sheer force of will and precisely applied violence. Some of the stories were exaggerated, But not many. Marcus returned to New Eden one last time, to the cemetery where Sarah rested beneath the purple grass. He knelt beside her grave and placed a small metal object on the headstone, a piece of hull plating from the Imperial cruiser times domination asterisk, engraved with the names of every person who had died in the attack on their settlement. "It's finished," he said quietly. "They won't be coming back. None of them will." The wind rustled through the grass, carrying the scent of growing things. The settlement was being rebuilt, stronger than before. Children played in the distance, their laughter a sound that Marcus had thought he might never hear again. He stayed until sunset, watching the sky fill with stars. Somewhere out there, the galaxy continued its ancient dance of predator and prey, empire and rebellion, violence and peace. There would always be tyrants who needed killing, innocents who needed protecting, wrongs that could only be righted with blood. Marcus stood and walked away from the cemetery, his footsteps silent on the purple grass. Behind him, Sarah's headstone caught the last light of the setting sun. But Marcus didn't look back. The Baba Yaga had work to do.